The massive doors of the Galactic Council chambers opened with a sound like thunder rolling across distant mountains. General Maya Torres stepped through the entrance, her military boots clicking against the polished crystal floor with steady rhythm. The sound echoed through the enormous space, announcing humanity's arrival to the most powerful governing body in the known galaxy. The chamber stretched before them like a cathedral built by gods. Towering columns of living metal pulsed with the heartbeats of distant stars, while floating platforms held representatives from hundreds of alien species. Some had multiple eyes that tracked movement like weapon systems, others floated in tanks of liquid methane, or hung from the ceiling in gravity-defying webs. The air itself shimmered with translation fields that converted thousands of different languages into comprehensible sound. At the center of this impossible space sat the Throne of Judgment, carved from a single asteroid that had witnessed the birth of solar systems. Upon it lounged King Vorthak, ruler of the largest empire in galactic history. His serpentine body coiled around the throne with casual arrogance, scales shifting from deep purple to angry red as he watched the humans approach. Maya Torres walked forward with 3 other members of Earth's diplomatic team. Behind her came Dr. James Park, the xenobiology expert who had studied alien physiology for decades. Beside him walked Captain Lisa Rodriguez, a military intelligence officer whose calm expression hid years of strategic planning. The 4th member of their team was Professor David Chen, a historian who had spent his life studying the rise and fall of galactic civilizations. The chamber fell silent except for the rhythmic pulsing of bioluminescent walls. Hundreds of alien eyes focused on the small group of humans who had dared to request an audience with the Galactic Council. Most species only appeared before this assembly when they were being conquered or absorbed into existing empires. Few had ever come voluntarily. King Vorthak's voice resonated through the chamber with harmonic frequencies that vibrated through bone and metal. So the creatures from the 3rd planet of an unremarkable star system finally present themselves to galactic authority. How amusing. His multiple arms gestured dismissively as he addressed the assembled representatives. Esteemed council members, we gather today to discuss the latest primitive species to achieve basic space travel. These humans have been observed for several solar cycles, and their behavior patterns are concerning. General Torres stepped forward, her hand resting casually on the ceremonial weapon at her side. To most observers, it appeared to be a simple metal sword, a relic from humanity's violent past. They had no idea how wrong they were. Your Majesty, Torres replied, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's complex acoustics. Humanity stands ready to hear the Council's wisdom. We understand that our recent expansion into nearby star systems has drawn attention from galactic authorities. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the assembled aliens. The concept of a primitive species voluntarily limiting their expansion was almost incomprehensible to most galactic civilizations. King Vorthak's scales darkened to a deeper shade of red. Attention! Your species has established military colonies on 17 worlds in the past decade. You have ignored all attempts at diplomatic contact from established galactic powers. Most concerning of all, you have actively resisted integration into existing trade networks and political structures. Perhaps, Dr. Park interjected smoothly, that resistance stems from our observation of how other species have fared under galactic integration. Our historical analysis suggests that most newly contacted civilizations experience significant population decline and cultural destruction within a generation of joining the galactic community. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien sounds. Translators struggled to convert outraged clicking, harmonious singing, and subsonic rumbling into human languages. Several species representatives activated privacy shields around their platforms, engaging in urgent communications with their homeworlds. You dare to question the benefits of galactic civilization? Vorthak's roar shattered several crystalline formations near the throne. Every species that joins our community gains access to technologies beyond their wildest dreams. They receive protection from hostile forces and integration into trade networks that span thousands of worlds. At the cost of their independence, Captain Rodriguez observed, stepping forward to join the conversation. Our intelligence analysis indicates that member species typically lose their ability to make independent decisions within 50 years of integration. Their military forces are absorbed into imperial fleets. Their resources are redirected to support galactic infrastructure projects. And their populations, Professor Chen added quietly, are often relocated to serve the needs of more established civilizations. Cultural practices that don't align with galactic norms are systematically discouraged or eliminated. The silence that followed was pregnant with tension. No species had ever stood before the Galactic Council and openly criticized the fundamental structure of galactic civilization. Most were too awed by the technology and power on display to question the system that had brought them there. King Vorthak's form began to expand as his ceremonial compression field deactivated. Now he loomed 30 feet tall, his multiple arms spreading wide to display claws that could shred battleship armor. You have just accused the Galactic Council of systematic oppression, humans. That borders on insult to every civilized species in this chamber. General Torres took another step forward, bringing herself to the very edge of the judgment platform. Your Majesty, we're not here to insult anyone. We're here to negotiate humanity's place in the galactic community on terms that preserve our independence and cultural integrity. Negotiate? The word seemed to surprise the alien king. Primitive species do not negotiate with galactic powers. They submit to superior wisdom and accept their assigned role in the greater community. Perhaps that's where our species differs from others you've encountered, Torres replied calmly. Humans have a long history of resisting superior forces when we believe our fundamental rights are threatened. We've spent our entire evolutionary history fighting things that were bigger, stronger, and better armed than we were. Dr. Park activated a small holographic projector, displaying a three-dimensional map of human space. We've prepared a comprehensive proposal for limited engagement with galactic civilization. Controlled trade relationships, cultural exchange programs, joint scientific research initiatives, all structured to benefit both humanity and existing galactic powers without requiring us to surrender our sovereignty. The display showed detailed analysis of resource distribution, technological development timelines, and potential areas of mutual cooperation. It was clearly the product of decades of careful study and planning. Impossible, Vorthak snarled. No species has ever been permitted to maintain independence while participating in galactic affairs. The system requires unified authority and coordinated resource allocation. The system, Captain Rodriguez replied, requires member species to surrender their freedom in exchange for protection from threats that the galactic powers themselves often create or maintain. What are you implying? Professor Chen stepped forward with another holographic display. Our historical analysis suggests that many of the hostile forces that threaten primitive worlds are actually proxy forces supported by established galactic powers. The protection offered by galactic civilization often involves defending new members from threats created by the very system they're joining. The chamber erupted in chaos as representatives began urgent communications with their homeworlds. Some species were clearly recognizing patterns they had never questioned before. Others were calculating which side to support in what was rapidly becoming a diplomatic crisis. King Vorthak's scales had shifted to pure black, a color that Vorthakan specialists recognized as the precursor to combat rage. You have just accused the Galactic Council of maintaining artificial conflicts to justify political control. That is tantamount to declaring war on galactic civilization itself. General Torres smiled, an expression that didn't reach her eyes. Your Majesty, we haven't declared war on anyone. We've simply pointed out that humanity prefers to face our challenges without surrendering our independence to solve them. She paused, letting her words echo through the suddenly silent chamber. The question now is whether galactic civilization is mature enough to accept a member species that insists on remaining free. 3 weeks after the diplomatic disaster in the Galactic Council chambers, the most feared beings in the Vorthak Empire gathered in the obsidian war room of the royal flagship. The Shadow Guard represented death incarnate across 1,000 conquered worlds, 7 assassins whose very names were whispered as curses by species that had learned to fear the night. Nexus floated in his containment suit, his gaseous form shifting between visible spectrums as deadly toxins swirled within the transparent chamber. A single breath of his essence could kill most carbon-based life forms within seconds. His species had evolved in the radioactive atmosphere of a dying star system, developing the ability to exist as living poison. Beside him stood Razek, her forearms flexing as bioengineered claws extended from her fingertips. The insectoid warrior's compound eyes reflected the room's harsh lighting in thousands of fragments, each one capable of tracking independent targets. Her carapace bore the scars of 100 successful assassinations, each mark representing a political leader who had dared to oppose Vorthican authority. At the tactical display, Krell polished one of his thermal grenades with the loving care of an artist maintaining his tools. The stocky reptilian's scarred hide told the story of countless infiltrations across hostile territory. He could destroy a city block with equipment small enough to fit in a briefcase, and had done so on more than one occasion. The team's demolitions expert worked alongside Vera, whose pale humanoid form concealed modifications that made her the perfect infiltrator. Her skin could change color and texture to match any environment, while surgical alterations allowed her to mimic the basic physiology of dozens of different species. She was a living weapon designed to get close to targets who thought themselves safe behind layers of security. Sarah stood apart from the others, studying holographic displays of Earth with the focused intensity of a true predator. As the group's strategist and arguably their most dangerous member, she had planned the deaths of kings and emperors across galactic space. Her pale features showed no emotion as she analyzed humanity's military capabilities, but her colleagues knew that behind those cold eyes, she was already calculating exactly how their targets would die. King Vorthak dominated the center of the war room, his massive form coiled in barely contained rage. His scales still bore traces of the black coloration that had consumed him since the diplomatic humiliation in the council chambers. The fact that a primitive species had publicly questioned his authority before the entire galactic community was an insult that demanded blood in response. These humans have committed an unforgivable offense. Vorthak's voice rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. They have challenged the fundamental order of galactic civilization. They have questioned the authority of the council itself. Most importantly, they have made me appear weak before my subjects. Nexus drifted closer to the central display, his form brightening with interest. The diplomatic records indicate unusual tactical thinking. Most species either submit immediately or resort to desperate military resistance. These humans chose a third option. They chose to embarrass us publicly, Sarah observed, manipulating the holographic display to show recordings from the council session. Look at their positioning, their timing, their coordination of arguments. This wasn't desperation or accident. They planned every word, every gesture, every revelation designed to undermine galactic authority. The recordings showed General Torres and her team moving with practiced precision through their presentation. Each revelation had been carefully timed to maximize impact, building to conclusions that forced the council to confront uncomfortable truths about their own methods of control. Standard assassination protocols won't work here, Sarah continued, her analysis clinical and precise. These humans have demonstrated sophisticated understanding of galactic politics. They'll expect retaliation. They'll have prepared countermeasures. Razek's mandibles clicked in what might have been anticipation. What are you suggesting? That we approach this mission differently than our usual methods. I'm suggesting that we treat this like hunting actual prey instead of eliminating soft targets, Sarah replied. When was the last time any of us faced opponents who wanted to fight back? Most political assassinations involve targets who surrender when they see us coming. These humans killed a Vorthican diplomatic mission. The room fell silent as that observation sank in. The Shadow Guard's reputation was built on fear and inevitability. Their targets usually died from terror before the actual killing began. But according to intelligence reports, the humans had actively hunted Vorthak's diplomatic team, turning what should have been a standard intimidation mission into a bloodbath. Krell looked up from his equipment maintenance. The intelligence files indicate decentralized command structure. Multiple independent military forces scattered across their planet. How do we identify primary targets? We don't hunt their military, Sarah replied, calling up detailed psychological profiles. We hunt their emotions. Human pack bonding behavior makes them vulnerable to specific tactical approaches. They will sacrifice themselves to protect individuals they consider family. The display shifted to show General Torres' personal history. Born in the mountain regions of Colorado, decorated veteran of interplanetary conflicts, maintained close relationships with former military colleagues and civilian friends despite geographic separation. Regular communication patterns indicated strong emotional bonds across multiple social networks. Here, Sarah highlighted several individuals in the analysis. Primary emotional connections. Colonel Marcus Webb, her former commanding officer. Major Sarah Kim, her intelligence specialist. Dr. Rachel Foster, a childhood friend now working in xenobiology research. If we take any of these individuals, Torres will be compelled to respond. Nexus studied the profiles with professional interest. Standard hostage protocols. Capture, negotiate, execute when she arrives? Modified hostage protocols, Sarah corrected. We take the civilian researcher first. Academic target with minimal security. No military training. We make it look like an accident or random disappearance. Then we contact Torres with proof of life and our demands. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Humans would respond emotionally to threats against their social bonds, making them predictable. Once Torres came to negotiate for her friend's life, the Shadow Guard would have their opportunity to complete their primary mission. What about local security forces? Krill asked. Human population density creates significant witness problems. Human security forces are designed to handle local crime, not galactic-level infiltration, Sarah replied dismissively. Their technology is generations behind ours. Their tactical thinking is limited to planetary conflicts. They won't even detect our presence until it's too late. Vera activated her camouflage systems, her form flickering through several different appearances before settling on a generic, human-female configuration. Infiltration parameters look straightforward. Their cities are designed for easy movement. Their surveillance systems are primitive. Their social structures make target identification simple. Perfect, King Vorthak approved, his satisfaction evident in the lighter coloration spreading across his scales. Take the human general's friend. Make her watch everyone she cares about die slowly. Then bring me Torres's head as proof that no species challenges Vorthakan authority without consequences. The Shadow Guard began final preparations with the efficiency of apex predators preparing for a hunt. Weapons were calibrated for human physiology. Infiltration gear was tested against Earth's atmospheric conditions. Transportation was arranged through diplomatic channels that humans wouldn't think to monitor. Each assassin had killed hundreds of targets across dozens of worlds. Political leaders, military commanders, civilian dissidents who had dared to question galactic authority. This mission would be just another entry in their professional records. None of them noticed the subtle modifications Sarah made to their mission parameters as she compiled intelligence reports. None of them questioned why her tactical analysis focused so heavily on human military history, particularly their development of asymmetric warfare techniques. None of them wondered why she seemed so interested in studying conflicts where technologically inferior forces had defeated superior enemies. The Shadow Guard had never failed a mission in centuries of operation. They were the galaxy's most elite killers, instruments of precision death wielded by the most powerful empire in known space. They were about to discover that being elite killers in a civilized galaxy was very different from being elite killers on a world that had spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare. The Shadow Guard's infiltration of Earth's defense perimeter was executed with the precision that had made them legends across galactic space. Using captured diplomatic codes, their stealth ship slipped past orbital sensors that had been designed to detect conventional threats. The vessel touched down in the abandoned industrial district of Detroit, like a whisper against concrete, its advanced cloaking systems rendering it invisible to human detection methods. Within hours, they had established a base of operations in a derelict automobile factory. The massive building provided perfect cover, its rusted machinery and broken windows creating natural concealment for their equipment. The irony was lost on them that they had chosen to hunt humanity's greatest general from the ruins of humanity's former industrial heart. Surrounded by the skeletal remains of assembly lines that had once produced the vehicles that carried humans to their first real wars, Sarah established her command center in what had been the factory's main office, surrounding herself with holographic displays that showed real-time intelligence on their target. Dr. Rachel Foster worked at Stanford University, 3,000 miles away on the western coast of the continent. Her laboratory was located in the basement of the Xenobiology building, a converted shelter from humanity's nuclear age that now housed some of Earth's most sensitive alien research. Target analysis complete, Sarah announced to her team. Dr. Foster maintains regular contact with General Torres through weekly video communications. She has no military training, no combat experience, and works alone in her laboratory most evenings. Security at the university is minimal, designed to handle student misconduct rather than hostile infiltration. Nexus drifted closer to examine the holographic layout of the university campus. Access routes look straightforward. Multiple entry points, minimal surveillance coverage, standard academic facility vulnerabilities. Almost too easy, Razik observed, her compound eyes scanning the tactical data. Human security protocols seem remarkably inadequate for protecting important research facilities. Krell looked up from his equipment calibration. What about response times? Local law enforcement, military backup, emergency protocols? Human emergency response is designed around conventional threats, Sarah replied dismissively. Police forces equipped for local crime, military units stationed hundreds of miles away. Even if they detect our presence, they won't have time to coordinate an effective response before we complete the extraction. The plan was elegantly simple. Nexus would infiltrate through the building's ventilation system, while Razek scaled the exterior walls with impossible silence. Krell would position himself at the main exits, ready to eliminate any security response. Sarah would coordinate from their mobile command post, monitoring human communication frequencies for any sign that their operation had been detected. Dr. Foster would be rendered unconscious with carefully calibrated neurotoxins, extracted to a secure location, and used as bait to draw General Torres into a trap of their choosing. Clean, professional, efficient, exactly the kind of operation that had made the Shadow Guard the most feared assassins in galactic space. The university campus at night was a maze of shadows and sodium lighting. Students moved between buildings in small groups, their laughter echoing across empty courtyards. Security guards patrolled with the casual attention of people who had never encountered a real threat. The xenobiology building stood apart from the main campus, its basement laboratories humming with the sounds of equipment that analyzed samples from dozens of distant worlds. Dr. Rachel Foster was exactly where intelligence had predicted, working late in her laboratory while surrounded by specimen containers that held biological samples from across known space. She appeared younger than her photographs suggested, with the intense focus of someone completely absorbed in groundbreaking research. Her workstation was covered with displays showing genetic analyses of alien organisms that most humans would never see. Nexus descended through the ventilation system in his gaseous form, prepared to render her unconscious with a carefully measured dose of neurotoxin. The operation should have taken 30 seconds. Infiltrate, incapacitate, extract. Clean and simple. Dr. Foster looked up from her microscope and smiled directly at the ventilation grate. You know, she said conversationally, not showing any sign of surprise or fear, Maya told me you would probably try something like this. The laboratory's lighting changed from soft white to harsh red as emergency protocols activated. Blast doors slammed shut over the exits with the finality of a vault ceiling. Automated systems throughout the building began transmitting alerts as they detected the presence of unknown alien biochemistry. Nexus. Abort immediately. Sarah's voice crackled through the communicator from their command post. The entire building is in lockdown. I'm reading energy signatures throughout the complex. This is a trap. But Nexus was already discovering that his neurotoxins, so effective against most galactic species, had absolutely no effect on human physiology. Dr. Foster continued working at her console, her fingers dancing across controls that were activating systems throughout the university complex. Maya said you would probably underestimate us, Dr. Foster continued, her voice calm despite the fact that one of the galaxy's most feared assassins was floating 3 feet away from her. She said you would think of us as primitives, that you would assume our technology was inferior, just because we're newer to the galactic community. Through the laboratory's reinforced windows, Nexus could see movement in the surrounding buildings. Not campus security or local police, but figures in full military gear moving with the coordinated precision of experienced soldiers, dozens of them, carrying weapons that sparked with unfamiliar energy signatures. What you probably don't realize, Dr. Foster said, turning to face him directly, is that Maya has been planning for this since she got back from your king's judgment chamber. She figured you would come after people she cares about. She was absolutely right about that, but she was also counting on you being arrogant enough to assume we couldn't detect your presence. The specimen containers around the laboratory began to hum with increasing power. The alien organisms inside weren't research subjects, Nexus realized with growing horror. They were weapons, biological weapons that Earth had been studying and adapting for use against specific galactic species. Maya also said you would probably try to take hostages to draw her out. Dr. Foster continued. That's very traditional thinking. Very predictable. But here's something about humans that maybe your intelligence analysis missed. The laboratory's containment systems reversed polarity. Instead of keeping dangerous organisms contained, they were now designed to prevent escape. Nexus found himself trapped in a cage of electromagnetic force while human soldiers surrounded the building with weapons specifically designed to kill Vorthakan anatomy. We don't negotiate with terrorists. Outside the laboratory, Razak and Krell were discovering that their positions had been compromised from the moment they set foot on Earth. Human military forces had been tracking their infiltration since their ship touched down in Detroit. The abandoned factory they thought was perfect cover had been under surveillance for weeks. Its every entrance monitored by sensors they had never detected. Their stealth technology, so effective against galactic species, was useless against detection methods that humans had developed specifically for hunting invisible enemies. Thermal imaging, motion sensors, electromagnetic field detection, biochemical analysis of atmospheric disturbances. Earth's military had spent months preparing for exactly this kind of infiltration. In their command post, Sarah watched her perfect plan disintegrate in real time. Every communication channel was being jammed by signals that shouldn't have been possible with human technology. Every escape route was blocked by military forces that moved with impossible coordination for a supposedly primitive species. Her tactical computer was overloading as it tried to process the impossibility of their situation. Human forces were using equipment that bore Vorthakan design signatures, but with improvements that shouldn't have been possible. Plasma weapons that were 30% more efficient than standard Imperial designs. Communication jammers that operated on frequencies the Vorthak Empire considered classified. Her personal communicator crackled with an incoming transmission on an encrypted frequency that humans shouldn't have been able to access. Shadow Guard, this is General Torres. The voice was calm, professional, and absolutely confident. I'm transmitting coordinates for your extraction point. You have exactly 10 minutes to reach that location before my people finish surrounding your current position. Sarah's tactical display showed the coordinates. A clear killing ground 3 blocks from their current position, with perfect fields of fire from multiple elevated positions and no meaningful cover for retreating forces. Oh, and Sarah? The general's voice took on a conversational tone that was somehow more terrifying than any threat. I read your tactical analysis of human warfare doctrine. Very thorough research, very professional assessment. But you missed the most important lesson from our military history. What lesson? Sarah found herself asking, even as she coordinated her team's fighting retreat through increasingly hostile territory. The coordinates General Torres had provided led to Pier 39 in San Francisco Bay, a tourist destination that had been hastily evacuated under the pretense of a gas leak emergency. In the pre-dawn darkness, fog rolled off the water like ghostly fingers, creating what appeared to be perfect cover for snipers in ambush positions. Sarah recognized the tactical situation immediately as she led her surviving team toward the meeting point. It was a textbook killing ground. Multiple elevated firing positions in the surrounding buildings, no meaningful cover on the pier itself, clear fields of fire from at least a dozen different angles. The kind of obvious trap that should have been easy to avoid, which meant it was exactly the kind of trap that humans would use when they wanted their enemies to know it was a trap. This is suicide, Krell muttered, checking his remaining thermal charges. The Shadow Guard's fighting retreat through San Francisco had cost them most of their equipment and all of their tactical advantages. Human forces had anticipated every escape route, countered every standard infiltration technique, and herded them toward this confrontation with methodical precision. We have no choice, Sarah replied, coordinating her team's final approach through the abandoned tourist area. All other exits from the city are blocked. They've been herding us here since we left the university district. Nexus flickered between visible spectrums, his containment suit damaged from their escape through increasingly hostile territory. Perhaps negotiation remains possible. Humans appear to value dialogue over immediate violence. Humans, Razak observed, her bioengineered claws fully extended in preparation for combat, appear to value tactical superiority over everything else. The pier stretched 200 meters into the bay, its weathered wooden planks creaking under the weight of fog-dampened air. At the far end, a single figure waited in formal military dress uniform, hands clasped behind her back in a posture of parade rest. General Maya Torres stood alone, apparently unarmed, watching the Shadow Guard approach with the infinite patience of an apex predator. "That's far enough," Torres called when they reached the halfway point of the pier. Her voice carried clearly across the water, amplified by acoustic properties that suggested the entire area had been carefully prepared for this encounter. Sarah gestured for her team to spread into combat formation, but even as they moved, she could see the laser-targeting dots dancing across their bodies, dozens of them, originating from concealed positions throughout the surrounding area. Human snipers had them completely surrounded and outnumbered. "General Torres," Sarah called back, her voice maintaining professional composure despite their desperate situation. "I believe we find ourselves in what your species calls a standoff." "Do we?" Torres replied, and there was something in her tone that made every survival instinct Sarah possessed scream warnings. "That's interesting, because from where I'm standing, this looks more like what we call a teaching moment." The general stepped forward, moving with the easy confidence of someone who controlled every aspect of their environment. For the first time, the Shadow Guard could see her clearly without the distortion of holographic displays or long-distance surveillance. She was smaller than her intelligence files had suggested, barely reaching average human height, with the lean build of someone who spent more time thinking than fighting. She looked, in fact, exactly like the kind of soft civilian target the Shadow Guard specialized in, eliminating quickly and efficiently. "Your king sent you here to kill me," Torres continued conversationally, her pace steady and unhurried despite the weapons trained on her from multiple directions, "to make an example of the human who dared to challenge Vorthican authority in front of the Galactic Council. Very traditional intimidation tactics. Very predictable. Surrender immediately," Nexus hissed through his damaged voice synthesizer, "and we will grant you a quick death instead of the prolonged suffering our king demands." Torres smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be more threatening than any weapon. "You know what I find fascinating about the Vorthican Empire? You've conquered most of the galaxy using exactly the same tactics for over 1,000 years. Overwhelming technological superiority, fear-based compliance, systematic intimidation of civilian populations. It's worked beautifully against civilized species." She continued walking toward them, her pace steady and unhurried despite being obviously outnumbered by the galaxy's most feared assassins. "But here's the thing about humans that your intelligence analysis completely missed. We're not civilized. We're barely domesticated. Do you know what we call creatures like your king in our oldest stories? We call them dragons. Ancient evils that terrorize innocent people until a hero comes along to slay them." Krell raised his plasma rifle, targeting systems locking onto the approaching human figure. "Stop moving or I will fire." "Oh, please do," Torres replied with genuine enthusiasm. "I'm extremely curious to see what happens when you try." The demolitions expert's weapon discharged with a brilliant flash of superheated energy. The plasma bolt struck General Torres' center mass exactly where her heart should have been. The energy discharge was sufficient to vaporize most organic matter in a 3-meter radius, leaving nothing but superheated air and scattered particles. General Torres kept walking. The Shadow Guard stared in shock as the human continued her approach, the smoking crater in her uniform revealing not flesh and bone, but sophisticated holographic projection equipment underneath. The figure they had been talking to was nothing more than an elaborate illusion. "Combat hologram," Sarah breathed, her tactical mind finally understanding the true scope of the trap they had walked into. She was never actually here. "Oh, but I am here," Torres' voice came from behind them now. The Shadow Guard spun to see another figure walking down the pier toward their position. Identical to the hologram, but this one casting no laser targeting dots, triggering no weapon locks from the surrounding snipers. "I'm right here. Just not where you expected me to be." Razek's compound eyes tracked both figures simultaneously, her confusion evident in the clicking of her mandibles. "Two of them. Which one is real?" "That's not the right question," the figure behind them said, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had planned every detail of this encounter. "The right question is why there are only two visible, when human tactical doctrine calls for redundancy in all critical operations." As if summoned by her words, Additional figures emerged from concealment positions the Shadow Guard had never detected. Not holograms this time, but human soldiers in full combat gear, rising from the water around the pier like mechanical sea monsters, dozens of them, armed with weapons that sparked with distinctly alien energy signatures. Vorthican plasma rifles, Torres explained, noting their recognition of the equipment, taken from your diplomatic mission 6 months ago. We've had all that time to reverse engineer them, improve their efficiency and adapt them for mass production. Turns out human manufacturing processes can produce them faster and more reliably than your Empire's foundries. Sarah's tactical computer was overloading as it tried to process the impossibility of their situation. Every calculation showed that this level of coordination should have been beyond human capabilities. The technology required to create convincing holograms, the manufacturing capacity to reproduce alien weapons, the communication systems necessary to coordinate forces across an entire planet. How many soldiers do you have positioned here? She asked, her professional curiosity overriding her survival instincts. On this pier? About 60. In the immediate area? Maybe 300. Across Earth? Torres shrugged as if the question was barely worth considering. Every human on the planet has been preparing for this war since I returned from your king's judgment chamber. You wanted to fight the human military? Congratulations. You just got your wish. The fog began to lift as dawn approached, revealing the true scope of their predicament. The bay was filled with vessels that definitely weren't civilian craft. Military patrol boats armed with weapons that bore no resemblance to human technology. The surrounding buildings bristled with defensive positions. The sky itself seemed to shimmer with barely visible aircraft holding complex attack formations. This is impossible, Nexus whispered, his form flickering with what might have been fear. No species can mobilize this quickly. No military can coordinate across an entire planet without centralized command authority. You're absolutely right, Torres agreed. No military could do this. But we're not just a military. We're a species that's been at war with itself for 10,000 years. We know how to fight. More importantly, we know how to fight together when something threatens all of us. The human forces began closing their perimeter with methodical precision, not attacking yet but moving with the coordinated efficiency of pack predators preparing to feed. What do you want from us? Krell asked, his voice barely steady. Torres's expression hardened into something that belonged on a battlefield rather than a diplomatic pier. I want you to carry a message back to your king. King Vorthak's rage had transcended simple anger and evolved into something that threatened the structural integrity of his flagship. In the 4 days since his Shadow Guard had transmitted their surrender from Earth, the Royal Command Center had been scarred by claw marks. 3 observation decks had been sealed due to hull breaches, and most of the Royal Court had fled to distant sectors of the Empire. The footage from Earth played continuously on every screen in the command center, a constant reminder of humiliation that grew worse with each viewing, the galaxy's most feared assassins being escorted through human cities like captured criminals. Crowds of humans lining the streets, not in fear or celebration, but with the cold curiosity of predators examining defeated prey. They're giving my Shadow Guard guided tours, Vorthak snarled, his massive form coiled around his command throne like a serpent preparing to strike, showing them museums, explaining their military history, treating elite assassins like visiting academics. Admiral Kresh, his chief military advisor, studied the tactical readouts with growing unease that he tried to hide from his increasingly unstable ruler. Your Majesty, the humans are demonstrating capabilities that our intelligence analysis completely failed to predict. Look at these orbital defense platforms. The display shifted to show Earth's space-based installations. What had been standard defensive arrays 4 months ago were now bristling with weapon systems that bore unmistakable Vorthicon design signatures, but improved and mass-produced at a scale that should have been impossible for a primitive world. They've reverse-engineered our technology, Kresh continued carefully. Not just copied it, but actually improved the basic designs. These plasma cannon arrays are operating at 40% higher efficiency than our standard military models, and they've produced thousands of them. Impossible, Vorthak spat, his scales shifting to deeper shades of black as his rage intensified. No species can master Vorthican engineering in a few months. Our technology represents centuries of advancement, millennia of accumulated knowledge. Unless, Admiral Kresh said quietly, that species has been designing weapon systems continuously for their entire evolutionary history. The transmission alert chimed through the command center with the distinctive harmonic pattern reserved for diplomatic communications. King Vorthak's scales erupted in violent patterns of red and black as General Torres's image materialized in the center of the room, transmitted from somewhere on the human homeworld. Your Majesty, she began with mock formality that made the alien king's claws extend involuntarily. I trust you've been enjoying our educational programs. Your assassins have been most cooperative. We've learned quite a lot about Vorthakan military doctrine from them. Behind Torres, the Shadow Guard could be seen seated around a conference table, engaged in animated discussion with human military officials. They weren't restrained or imprisoned. They were actively collaborating, sharing tactical information with obvious enthusiasm. What have you done to them? Vorthak demanded, his voice shaking the command center's superstructure. Done to them? Torres looked genuinely puzzled by the question. Your Majesty, I think you fundamentally misunderstand the situation here. Your assassins weren't captured or coerced. They defected. The word hung in the command center's atmosphere like a weapon discharge. Defected. It was a concept so alien to Vorthakan culture that most of the royal court didn't have proper translations for it in their language. Sarah has been particularly helpful, Torres continued, gesturing toward the Shadow Guard strategist. Did you know that your empire maintains detailed psychological profiles on every conquered species? Absolutely fascinating reading, especially the sections about systematic fear conditioning and population control through selective elimination of leadership figures. The general's image shifted to display a holographic analysis of the Vorthakan empire that was clinically devastating in its accuracy. Not the proud galactic civilization that official propaganda described, but a detailed breakdown of occupied territories, resource extraction quotas, and systematic oppression protocols, Your Majesty. Do you know what humans call an organization like yours? We call it a protection racket. Pay tribute or face destruction. Submit to authority or watch your world burn. Very straightforward. Very effective. Against species that haven't spent their entire existence learning to fight superior forces. Get to your point, human, Vorthak snarled, his control barely containing the urge to destroy everything within reach. The point is elegantly simple, Torres replied with deadly calm. Your empire relies entirely on fear for control. Your subject species obey because they believe resistance is futile, that your military might is overwhelming and inevitable. But what happens when other species observe that the legendary Vorthakan Shadow Guard can be defeated by a world you dismissed as primitive? As if summoned by her words, communication alerts began cascading through the command center's displays. Admiral Kresh's expression grew increasingly pale as he processed the incoming reports from across the Empire. Your Majesty, he whispered urgently, we're receiving communications from territories throughout Imperial space. The hegemony sectors are reporting significant delays in tribute shipments due to technical difficulties. The mining colonies in the Outer Rim are experiencing widespread labor disputes. Puppet governments are requesting emergency clarification of their territorial obligations. Torres smiled with predatory satisfaction. Information travels quickly through galactic communication networks. Amazing how fast word spreads when people realize their oppressors aren't as invincible as they pretended to be. You have destroyed nothing, Vorthak roared, his voice cracking armor plating throughout the command center. The Vorthakan Empire controls fleets that could reduce your pathetic world to radioactive dust. We have weapons that could sterilize every continent on your planet. Yes, you absolutely do, Torres agreed with disturbing calm. And if you choose to use them, you'll prove to every species in the galaxy that the only way the mighty Vorthakan Empire can handle resistance is through planetary genocide. That should do absolute wonders for your reputation among species who are already questioning your methods. The general paused, allowing that observation to penetrate Vorthak's rage-clouded thinking. But more importantly, Your Majesty, if you attack Earth, you'll be declaring war on a species that just demonstrated it can turn your own advanced technology against you. A species that has been perfecting the art of warfare since before your empire existed. A species that considers armed conflict to be just another form of problem-solving. Admiral Kresh was now receiving reports from military commanders throughout Imperial space. Supply convoys were experiencing mysterious mechanical failures, Communication relays were being disrupted by pirates using distinctly human tactical approaches. Garrison forces were reporting that local populations seemed remarkably well-informed about Vorthicon technological vulnerabilities. "What exactly do you want from the Vorthicon Empire?" Vorthak finally asked, his voice reduced to a dangerous whisper. "What I want is refreshingly simple," Torres replied. "I want the Vorthicon Empire to leave human space completely alone. Forever. I want your military forces to withdraw from our border systems immediately. And I want formal recognition that Earth has absolutely no interest in joining your galactic order under any circumstances. And if I refuse these demands?" Torres's expression shifted to something that belonged on ancient battlefields rather than diplomatic conferences. "Then we'll do what humans have always done when faced with bullies and tyrants, Your Majesty. We'll fight, and we'll teach every oppressed species in your empire exactly how we do it." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the Royal Command Center in stunned silence. King Vorthak stared at the empty space where the human general's image had been, his mind struggling to process a situation that had no precedent in Imperial history. "Admiral," he said quietly, his voice drained of its usual arrogance, "what are our realistic options?" Kresh consulted his tactical displays, his expression grim. "Military conquest of Earth remains technically possible, Your Majesty. But the cost would be enormous, and the political consequences across the Empire would likely be catastrophic. Half our subject species are already questioning our authority. A prolonged war with humans would almost certainly trigger rebellions on dozens of worlds. And if we accept their terms, then we legitimize resistance to Imperial authority. We admit that a single primitive world successfully dictated terms to the Vorthocon Empire. Every oppressed species in the galaxy will draw their own conclusions about our true strength." King Vorthak remained silent for a long moment, contemplating choices that all seemed to lead to the same inevitable conclusion. The galaxy had fundamentally changed. The age of unchallenged Vorthicon supremacy was ending. "Send a message to Earth," he finally ordered, each word extracted like a confession under torture. "Inform the humans that the Vorthicon Empire formally recognizes their territorial sovereignty and agrees to withdraw from their border systems as..." The humiliating message was transmitted across galactic space. King Vorthak realized that General Torres had been absolutely correct about human understanding of warfare. They had defeated the